Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of America Held Hostage podcast. Round two for this week. This is episode 7 already. It's crazy. I was actually talking to a friend last night, and it's crazy that we've pretty much been in quarantine for about a month, which is absolutely nuts. Hence the name of America Held Hostage. Before we get started, want to remind you, coming up this Saturday, the American Conservative Movement has its very first online conference. I'm the co-founder of ACM, but it's called Saving America Conference, and we're going to be talking a lot about the issues that John and I are actually talking about pretty much every single day. But we've got a great lineup of conservative voices, everybody from Jerry Wayne to Mindy Robinson to Michael Johns, who's the co-founder of the Tea Party. We got Pastor Greg Locke. We got just a great lineup of speakers. And the goal is just to unify everybody around conservatism and freedom and liberty and the Constitution, and try to begin to start a movement as we're coming out of this coronavirus crisis, in order to preserve our rights and make sure that we don't keep having big government solutions. So that's the goal. So this Saturday, make sure you check it out. You can go to AmericanConservativeMovement.com for more information. We are excited about this conference. It's gonna be a blast. It'll be streaming live on Facebook. So make sure you guys check that out. John, we're back today. I know we've got some catching up to do, even more from stories from over the weekend. Because again, there was so much. We crammed so much into yesterday's episode, and we still couldn't get through it all. And so it's insane, the kind of news, and not only just news, but news that's relevant to us as Americans and as conservatives.
Oh yeah, for the first time in my life, and I've thrived on staying informed and consuming current events, news, politics, but woke up this morning for the first time in my life, and it just felt like it was too much. It felt like, is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Because things are progressively getting worse. And it's been that way since Trump came down the escalator in 2015, and then gay marriage was made legal. We've just been in a warp speed of a news cycle. And now I feel like Doc Brown turning to Marty McFly in Back to the Future and saying, "Roads, where we're going, we don't need roads." And we're just headed to 88 miles an hour, and we're just going forward. Wheels spinning, there's fire on the ground. It's like, it's uncanny what we're having to go through. So we're going to start a new segment and a new way of how we do the podcast. The way that we'll do this is we'll do a rundown of about 5 minutes of quick hits, and then we'll do 4 or 5 stories where we highlight larger stories that we think are pertinent and relevant to what's happening today, and then we'll talk about it and have our back and forth. Then we'll end with our commentary, and we'll do that moving forward. So going back to the news of the weekend, as I go back to the top of my Twitter DMs, my digital stack of stuff. Thank you, Russ. So the rundown to start this morning. From Forbes, China's days as the go-to manufacturing hub for the Western world are over. Brick breaker Michael Johns writes in Forbes earlier this week. I need to also say we have so much news that we have to cover. We're not going to be able to link to all the stories from now on our YouTube, on our iTunes, on our Facebook posts. Follow me at @JHinton_ on Twitter, and all the links from these hard news sites will be posted throughout the day. So you can trust that what I'm telling you is actual news from hard news sites. So you're not going to get stuff from Conservative Treehouse, from your local blog down the street. You're not going to get it from InfoWars or Prison Planet, and you're not going to get it from like Gateway Pundit. It's all hard news. But I just wanted to say that moving forward. So next story. Federal judge grants a temporary restraining order blocking a Louisville mayor's order that prohibits drive-in church services on Easter. We alluded to this yesterday in the podcast, but the reason why I wanted to circle back around to this was because the edict that the judge issued, I wanted to read it so that you could hear in part what the judge wrote. He said, on Holy Thursday, an American mayor criminalized the communal celebration of Easter. That sentence is one that this court never expected to see outside the pages of a dystopian novel, or perhaps the pages of The Onion. But 2 days ago, citing the need for social distancing during the current pandemic, Louisville's Mayor Greg Fisher ordered Christians not to attend Sunday services, even if they remained in their cars to worship, and even though it's Easter. The mayor's decision is stunning, and it is beyond all reason unconstitutional. That was but a portion of what the judge wrote. He closed his commentary by saying the Christians of On Fire Church, which he ruled in favor of, however, owe no one explanation as to why they will gather together this Easter Sunday to celebrate what they believe to be a miracle and a mystery. True, they can attempt to explain it. True, they can try to teach it. But to the non-believer, the passion of Jesus, the betrayals, the torture, the state-sponsored murder of God's only Son, and an empty tomb found on the third day makes no sense at all. Even to the believer, or at least to some of them, it can be incomprehensible as well. But for the men and women of On Fire Christian Church, Christ's sacrifice isn't about the logic of this world, nor is their Easter celebration. It is the reason they will be there for each other and their Lord on every Sunday, including this Easter Sunday. So the next story that we have in our digital stack of stuff, Andy No said that he can't independently verify this, but now we have articles coming out from Bloomberg, and I've seen other sources that I could have linked to this morning, Jeff, of racism against Africans happening in China. So this is interesting that there's Andy No says, I can't independently verify this particular instance, but can confirm that very similar messages are being posted in southern China, where most African expatriates are. The U.S., who China accuses of racism, has also been speaking out on this issue. Africans and U.S. officials say blacks are being mistreated in China's Guangzhou province and in the Chinese city of Guangzhou, and it's happening publicly and privately. Now, this is we will get to this story later, Jeff, but we found out over the weekend that Smithfield Foods, based out of South Dakota, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, they supply 5% of the pork producing in the country. They're shutting down at the end of this month because they have had a huge outbreak of coronavirus. Half of the coronavirus numbers, and I don't want to give an actual number because I don't know what the number is in South Dakota, but half of the numbers in South Dakota are based out of this plant when it comes to coronavirus. That is why they're shutting down. But the CEO is warning of food shortages later on this year if the trend continues. That sounds very, very disturbing to me. We're also finding out that there are beef producers in Iowa that are getting ready to shut down as well. We're also hearing last week that there were egg and dairy farmers, not only in upstate New York, but also in Wisconsin, that are having to dump milk and eggs because they have no place for their supply chain to go. Yet I find it interesting that my local Walmart here in New Jersey posted a laminated sign in the egg section saying that because we're limited to the amount of eggs and supply doesn't meet demand, we're having to raise the prices of eggs. And I thought, well, why not just redistribute your supply chain? Because there's plenty of farmers that need to dump off their eggs, and they're just dumping them on their fields now. Another story from over the weekend. We told you that churches in Kentucky were given citations. I wanted to read what that actual citation said. As the brown shirts, otherwise known as the Kentucky State Police, in this instance, decided to, we were just following orders. Said this vehicle's presence at this location indicates that its occupants are present at a mass gathering prohibited by the orders of the Kentucky governor and the cabinet of the Kentucky Health and Family Services. As a result, this vehicle's occupants and everyone they come in contact with are at risk of contracting COVID-19, a respiratory illness that can be severe and lead to death, particularly for older adults and those with underlying heart, lung, kidney, and immunity issues. Where people congregate unnecessarily or fail to follow adequate social distancing practices, they are spreading COVID-19, creating scenes of an emergency. This vehicle's license plate number has been recorded. Employees of the local health department will be contacting those associated with this vehicle with self-quarantine documents, otherwise known as house arrest, including an agreement requiring the vehicle's occupants and anyone in the house to self-quarantine for 14 days. Failure to sign this measure or comply with the agreement may result in further enforcement measures. Please be advised that 39A.990 makes it a Class A misdemeanor to violate an emergency order. Records maintained by the Commonwealth of Kentucky are subject to disclosure under the Open Records Act. If that doesn't sound dystopian, I don't know what will. In other news from over the weekend, we were told a year ago that Foxconn, this is a technology company that makes parts for Apple and Samsung devices, that they would be opening a building and bringing jobs to Wisconsin. Today, TheVerge.com announced they have pictures that Foxconn building is still empty. Vox.com is reporting that the coronavirus economy plans are clear. There is no return to normal set in 2020. Person that I follow, Shannon Joy Radio, who will eventually be on the cast later, said, makes you wonder what the plan was all along. I feel like we're being enslaved. Fight this, America. Pray God delivers us. I think we're all praying right now that God would deliver us. Also over the weekend, we found that the New York Times tweeted a story that the coronavirus outbreak is transforming the way Americans spend money. The charts show that in a matter of weeks, pillars of American industry have essentially ground to a halt while others have boomed. Groceries are still at the same level. They boomed over the last 4 weeks, but they're back at the same level that they were before the lockdowns. But we're seeing anywhere from a 20 to a 70% drop in things like health and beauty, entertainment and restaurants, transportation, shopping, just non-essential shopping, and travel. We're also finding out that China has imposed restrictions on the publication of academic research on the origins of the novel coronavirus, according to CNN. According to a central government directive and online notices published by 2 Chinese universities. And these notices have since been scrubbed from the web. TechnologyReview.com is reporting that Germany took 500 blood samples in a village and found that 2% of the residents were actively infected by coronavirus, but 14% had antibodies meaning that they were now immune. Based on this research firm in Germany now determines that the mortality rate of COVID-19 is 0.37%, or 37 hundredths of a percent. The Daily Mail has said that Americans should brace for 18 months of shutdowns as the U.S. economy faces a long, hard road to recovery. And that was said by Neil Kashari, who is an economic guru, when he was on Face the Nation earlier this past weekend. Also, the Epoch Times tweeted over the weekend, 460,000 Chinese firms went under in the first quarter, underscoring the economic impact of the virus in the Chinese economy. The U.S. Postmaster General, according to Breitbart News, Megan Brennan, is telling the House Committee on Oversight and Reform in a video that unless the U.S. Postal Service gets a $50 billion federal bailout, it will run out of money by the end of September. Alex Berenson, a former New York Times reporter who is now a go-to for news on coronavirus and things that are related to coronavirus outrage. You can find him on Twitter at Alex Berenson, Berenson, tweeted, "Now this is viral growth. A North Carolina Facebook group called #ReopenNorthCarolina began last Tuesday and as of Monday has 21,000 members. It is calling on a protest tomorrow at the state capitol. North Carolina has a population of 10.4 million people, has 81 COVID-19 deaths, and 331 people hospitalized." If you look at what Clay Travis tweeted, per capita coronavirus death rates comparing the United States to major countries, the United States is second in confirmed deaths per capita, and the only other country lower than us is Germany. But you're not hearing that on the news, Jeff.
Not at all.
Yeah. We're also finding out that data from the CDC contradicts what those those orders that were printed on those windshields said. Surprisingly, CDC officials are saying that smokers are now found to be less likely to be hospitalized with COVID-19 than that of non-smokers, and that this looks robust across the country. This data is coming from the CDC and is shocking. According to hospitalization statuses and underlying conditions that the CDC has been tracking from February 12th to March 28th, 2.3% of those hospitalized were former smokers, 1.3% were current smokers. The total number of that as of March 28th was about 260 people. Yesterday, Bernie Sanders endorsed Joe Biden for the presidency. We're also hearing reports today that former President Barack Obama will endorse Weekend and Biden's as well. We'll see if they prop him up beside the jukebox, Jeff, or if they're going to make a play to replace him at the convention. I would say odds are 50-50. We're also finding out that the FBI was made aware that a portion of the Steele dossier was likely the product of a Russian disinformation campaign. This broke yesterday. Never let a good crisis go to waste for the actual truth to come out. The FBI was made aware that the Steele dossier was likely a product of a Russian disinformation campaign meant to harm U.S. foreign relations, according to previously redacted footnotes from the IG report by the independent investigator for the House, Horowitz. That was published by the Epoch Times. Also seeing that Bloomberg.com is reporting that Britain's most advanced scientific teams are saying that a vaccine against the coronavirus could be ready by September. Now, you tweeted this to me. This is one of the first stories that we're going to get to where we're going to discuss some things, because now we're out of the quick hits. and we're going to go and talk about some other stories that are pertinent. But you sent me this story yesterday, Jeff, and I thought it was rather interesting. From the UK Daily Mail, we found out that the National Institutes of Health, which Dr. Fauci works for, gave a $3.7 million grant to the Wuhan virus lab that is at the center of the coronavirus debate. So according to this story from the UK Daily Mail, and I'm waiting for it to load here, a $3.7 million grant was given to this Wuhan lab. What are your thoughts on that right now, Jeff, as I wait for this to load?
Well, I feel like in general, a lot of conservatives have a lot of serious questions about Fauci, and it just seems like he's constantly kind of undermining President Trump and trying to maneuver everything and manipulate everything in his way. He's been very supportive of the WHO as well. And then all of a sudden now we find out that he's financially tied essentially with the lab where all of this is coming from. And so we're just sitting here like, is this why he seems to be acting strange and manipulative and things like that? Is because he has a conflict of interest. And so then the question is, should somebody with a potential conflict of interest be the one that's essentially making the decisions on the health and whether people live or die here in the United States? My take would be, I think we need somebody who's not directly tied with the lab that's over there in China. And I totally feel like this is a complete conflict of interest, and he should be replaced. Doesn't necessarily mean that he actually did anything wrong himself. It's just simply stating there is a conflict of interest, and I think it needs to be alleviated.
Do I think that there's a conspiracy theory here? No. I think if we look at it from a biblical perspective, remember in the Old Testament there was an Israelite king that was warned not to show the armaments and his vast wealth to his enemies. He ignored that warning from a prophet of the Lord, and he entered into peaceful agreements with people that were considered enemies of God. And then he brought those sort of allies in and showed them his vast armaments, his vast wealth. And then a couple years later, they came and ransacked the place because they knew where they knew where the weaknesses lied. And he had entered into alliances with people that didn't have his same worldview. I think that this is the same thing here. You're thinking that you're doing some good by, let's give, $3.7 million in a research grant to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, not realizing that they're experimenting on something. You're taking it at face value that they're experimenting on these bats that have coronavirus because they want the same thing you do. They just want to help the public. They just want to help the public good and serve the public health. When in reality, I wouldn't trust anything that a godless, pagan, communist government is telling you. They need Jesus. They need freedom, and that's the government. The people, I believe, want freedom, but the people are being put down each and every time. Look at Tiananmen Square in 1989. Look at Hong Kong last year. And isn't it – let me just say this, Jeff. I find it a little concerning that we enter into a trade war with China. Trump issues tariffs. We find out that China is seeing a 20% drop in its economy over the last 3 years because of those tariffs. So they're entered into a recession. Then Hong Kong says, we don't want to bow before your chocolate bunnies. We still want freedom. Those protests went on for 8 months. Then, right as we sign a trade agreement with China for $250 billion, it brings them back to the table. Then this coronavirus outbreak begins. Is that coincidence?
Oh, yeah, of
it
course.
might be. Yeah. it might be a coincidence, but I would never underestimate your enemies trying to never let a good crisis go to waste.
Well, yeah, and the thing is too is that like I don't understand why anybody would think that, oh, that can never happen when you're coming from essentially our enemy that we've been relying on for so many years. Like literally, we are like China is our enemy, and yet at the same time we're doing more business with them than anybody else, which literally makes absolutely no sense at all. And so there has been a deep concern with, are they even poisoning the products that they're shipping over here? I mean, we're finding that a lot of, like, I remember that there was a big outbreak of lead in kid toys
Cat
and baby
food,
toys and everything.
also cat food.
Yeah. And so you start thinking, like, is this intentional? Is this not intentional? But yet we're going to keep coming back. We're going to keep buying this cheap garbage coming out of China. Again, it's why we need to stop relying on other people, other countries, and especially stop relying on communist China. I mean, they cannot be trusted at all. I mean, and they're stealing all of our stuff.
Well, intellectual property rights. They have no copyright laws, so that's why a Jostens that makes a championship ring, that if you were to buy a replica of it from them, it would be, I don't know, anywhere from $350 to $700 if you got the 2016 Chicago Cubs replica ring for your own private collection. You can buy one that looks just like it. It's just cheaply made with some silver over some zinc for about $40 over in China. Same thing with DVDs and music. They don't care. And that comes down to a difference in worldview. Why do they not care about poisoning your cat food? And that happened about 10 years ago, and 10 to 12 years ago, and it nearly killed my parents' cat, and it caused an early demise for her because it was lead. There was lead in the cat food, and that cat food was made in China. The lead with toys, it comes down to worldview. And we're talking about a constitutional way of life and a Christian worldview. For me, those go hand in hand, because if you're a conservative, and I know we're promoting the American conservative movement and we're promoting the Gatekeepers Online podcast network, I'm going to say this. If you are a conservative, those principles come from biblical edicts that when you put those conservative principles into practice, they cause families, lives, economies, businesses, marriages to flourish. Every part of life. Abraham Kuyper, a former Dutch theologian and prime minister, said there is not one single square inch in God's universe where he has not declared mine. So if we want to conserve the principles that allow lives and families to flourish and economies to grow and freedom to expand, those go hand in hand. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. Why did your Declaration of Independence, why did it appeal? Why did it reject the divine right of kings against King Henry VIII? And it appealed to the ultimate king and judge of the universe and say that we will not bow before King Henry. The patriots said when they took up arms against the British Army, we have no king but Jesus. That's why, Jeff. And that is the return to principles that we need to have. China doesn't have those principles. It's a difference in worldview. They don't care if they poison your cat. They don't care if they put lead in baby toys and they cause lead poisoning for your children. They don't have the regulations. They bow at the altar of money. They have a one-child policy that was a failure for 30 years, that now they have more men than women and they don't know what to do to repopulate their own population. And they put down democratic uprisings where people are yearning to breathe free, and we do nothing to stand with them. For me, it's appalling that George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump, wherever we've seen uprisings in Iran and China, we haven't said, we're there for you. We're going to bring our troops right to the border. And the thing is, if you make a run against your government, we're going to be right there for you, because wherever freedom and liberty is yearned for, we are the defenders. We are your allies. That's what I'd be doing if I was president. I wouldn't be allowing a Shah or a communist dictator to put down these uprisings. I'd be saying, you know what? We're right there. We're right at the doorstep. We're sending a couple of warships. You guys make a run against these people. We're right there for you, because we want freedom and liberty.
Yeah.
We tried to force it in Iraq. You can't force this stuff. But wherever the people want it, if we're conservatives, if we want that to expand, then that should be grown, nurtured, expanded.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the thing is too is that when you're in a godless society like China, you don't have value of human life. Like when you're here
Exactly right.
in a country that was founded on Christian values and founded on Christianity in all reality, we have a very high value of human life because we believe that each person is created in God's image. When you're in a communistic, atheistic society, there is no value to human life. You're just a statistic. You're just a number. You're just an animal. So you die of lead poisoning. So what? We've got 1 billion more people coming in behind you. It makes no difference to the leadership. And again, it comes back to they have a faulty worldview.
Yeah, it comes down to worldview. It just does. When you see people as human chattel, then you look at, I've quoted it before last week, I'll say it again. Napoleon said, men were made to be ruled with a rod of iron. And when you see people as human chattel that deserve to be ruled, then you don't value freedom and liberty. That's why America has been, up until March 17th, the greatest experiment in human freedom and liberty, and also, not coincidentally, the most prosperous nation to ever grace God's green earth, because it was founded on those principles. But now it feels like we were running on fumes for the last, 20, 30 years. And now we're seeing that petty tyrants, even Republican governors or Democrat governors in deep red states, are thinking that they can suspend your constitutional rights. And Americans need to start waking up. And the thing is that they are, because yesterday, this is another story that I wanted to get to, Jeff. Yesterday, Ohio residents protested against the coronavirus lockdown at the state capitol. We also are finding out that there is a petition on change.org that 200,000 people in a span of 96 hours have signed a recall petition to remove Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan. That's on the heels that 25% of Michiganders have filed for unemployment. And now, either today or tomorrow, we're finding out that there will be a march on the Michigan State Capitol in Lansing. And there's been a Michigan Facebook group that has expanded in 96 hours to 300,000 people who they want their way of life back. Thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, well, again, I'm surprised that it's taken this long for there to be any pushback from the American
Amen.
people. Like honestly, when they first announced that there was going to be stay-at-home orders, I thought that there was going to be riots in the street. I've been shocked that there hasn't been. As for the governor in Michigan, in all reality, she's posturing, and she's been posturing the entire time. She was one of the ones that banned the, and again I can never pronounce it, but the malaria drug. She's the one that I believe that she said that seeds weren't essential items to buy. They also
car seats.
Yeah, car seats
and paint.
American flags. There was tape across all of these items, and you're just sitting there and you're like, well, if you're already in the store, what difference does it make if you're buying an American flag or you're buying a bag of frozen peas? What difference does it make? You're already there. But it's overbearing, and it's overstepping your bounds and overstepping your authority as governor. And so, honestly, good for those people for finally pushing back. I think we need more of it. I think here in California, as leftist and progressive as we are, I think if things kept going as they've been going, that would have eventually happened here, because I think everybody's getting stir crazy and just getting tired of this. But finally, at least Gavin Newsom is announcing that that he's working with several other states in order to bring us out of lockdown. He's supposed to be announcing his plan today, so we're going to see what that is. But good for the people of Michigan for actually pushing back, and we need more of that across the country.
They can't arrest all of us, Jeff.
They could try, but
and we're not going Antifa.
No, not at all.
On this, we're not going Occupy Wall Street. I'm not arguing for violent uprisings. I'm calling for civil disobedience. You want to go to church and worship? Go to church and worship. You want to go to your state park and get out? Go to your state park and get out. And the thing is, if they fine you, if they threaten you, gladly either go to jail or rip the citation up right in their face. I'm not paying it. I'm never paying it. You work for me. My tax dollars go to pay your salary. And I didn't elect you as a judge to take away my constitutional rights. Just because you wear a black robe doesn't make you a one-man constitutional convention. It just doesn't. It doesn't. And the thing is that when you look at Jesus, when you look at Gandhi, when you look at MLK, when you look at the men who have shaped civil disobedience throughout world history, they were men who said, I will not comply with an unjust law. Because as St. Augustine said, I quoted before, I'm going to quote it again. St. Augustine said, an unjust law that is not based on the laws of nature and nature's God is no law at all. You do not comply with that. So you civilly disobey. And that's what Martin Luther King did when he marched in Birmingham and he got thrown into a jail, and he wrote the letter at a Birmingham jail. And if you haven't read it, that might be something that I draw from tomorrow for my commentary, because if you haven't heard it, the premise of that is your government has no right to take away your God-given constitutional rights, to dehumanize you and turn you into a number and say you don't matter. No, you do matter, because ultimately your rights come from God. They don't come from government. Another story. This is in your backyard, Jeff. This is troubling. Los Angeles County Sheriff tells me this is from Bill Fox LA. So he works for the LA Fox affiliate. Bill Melugan. Sure. I thought maybe you knew the name. We'll just call him Bill.
We'll just call him Bill.
M.
Bill. We'll just call him Bill.
Yeah. Bill from Fox says, LA County Sheriff tells me he has released 4,276 nonviolent inmates from the county jail, which is 25% of the inmate population. He says it's been effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19 with only 11 inmates infected, but now he fears a possible surge in crime.
Who would have thunk?
Now, you live in the Los Angeles area. You live in Orange County. Los Angeles County is right next to you. Your thoughts on this right now? This seems like a scene from The Purge, or if you remember Batman Begins, where they released all the prisoners on the island.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, for whatever reason, when you get into leftist states, you start caring about the lives and the and all of that of actual criminals more than you do the population that's actually obeying the laws. And we see that with implementation of low sentences for murderers, getting rid of the death penalty, and now what we're seeing is them actually releasing people that are considered high risk of COVID-19 from prison. under the guise of we're trying to protect them. Because, I mean, okay, logically it makes sense. If coronavirus gets into a prison, it could spread rampantly because everybody's in a cell right next to each other. I get that. But at the same time, they committed crimes. They're in there for a reason. Do we really think that in a state of emergency, it's going to be the most effective thing to release criminals out into the world where they can't get a job? So what are they going to do? How are they going to provide for themselves? Where are they going to get food? Where are they going to get resources?
Well, they're nonviolent, Jeff, and man's basically good. So I mean, if we just let them out on their say-so, they're not going to do anything. I mean, come on, we all evolved from monkeys. We're all the same. I mean, we all want the same things in life, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, and combine this with the fact that that out here in California, they're closing down gun shops because that's a non-essential store. So now what's happening is you're releasing more criminals into the public without resources, without jobs, without a way to support themselves, without a way to even have food or buy food, because where are they going to get the money to buy food? So then, obviously, crime is going to rise, but then you're shutting down the one store that allows regular people like you and I to actually go and defend ourselves from this uptick in crime by releasing criminals. None of it makes any logical sense at all.
Next thing you know, California is going to stop allowing you to buy baseball bats at your local Walmart.
Well, that's what we saw in the UK, where they banned guns, and then all of a sudden, crime. So obviously gun violence went down, and then all of a sudden stabbings with forks and kitchen knives started going crazy, and so then they had to start banning and limiting the sale of kitchenware because people were going around and stabbing each other. Like, it's a ridiculous, crazy problem. Again, it shows it's not the weapon itself that is the problem. It's the person behind the weapon. And it could be a baseball bat. It could be a gun. It could be a knife. It could be a fork. It could be anything. The problem isn't the weapon itself. The problem is the person holding the weapon.
Right. And you know what that reminds us of? It comes back to a theme in this podcast. It comes back to worldview. The fact that the mayor in Britain, Khan, a Muslim who believes, progressively that man is good, it's the weapon that is evil, will then ban the gun, well, then people turn to the knives. It doesn't matter. If you believe that man is inherently good, it's the device that's evil, well, then you're left to answer, well, then why are they still committing evil acts if we took away those devices? It's because the heart is desperately wicked, Jeff. Who can know it? That's just scripture. And if you don't believe that, take it up with God. All you got to do is just look on your local TV every day, and you'll see plenty of negative stories of people doing evil against each other. But we want to say that man is inherently good because of comparative morality. Well, I'm not as bad as that guy. Have you lied? Have you stolen? Have you cheated? Well, if you have, you're just as bad as the other guy. There's just different levels of what you think are evil acts. So the fact that the sheriff thinks he can release these prisoners and they're not going to commit crimes, or the UK mayor can take away guns and knives and people won't commit violent acts, that relates to worldview. And it's a logical inconsistency. But when you reject an eternal worldview and ethos, then you see mass chaos. And now you're seeing it run rampant in the culture, and you're seeing a display of that godless, progressive, utopian mentality that is now threatening your own personal safety and your constitutional rights and way of life on full display in the culture. And it's appalling. Another story. We found out also this morning that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is slashing growth forecasts. According to CNBC, they said this morning that very likely the world will experience its worst recession since the Great Depression of the 1930s. I think that's already baked into the cake, Jeff.
I don't know. I don't know if we're going to see a long-term recession. And that's just my opinion, because when we look historically at recessions, typically what happened is they were caused by illegal behavior that people were getting away with for the longest time. So we saw that with the .com business, where they were basically scamming, like, going public, with their companies and things like that. And then we saw with the housing market bubble, that was, they were doing predatory loans and loaning money to people who shouldn't have been qualifying for $1 million home. In this instance, this is just people can't go to work because they're on stay-at-home orders. There's not illegal behavior that's going to have to be rectified and fixing the markets and things like that. So in my opinion, I think it's going to be a little bit of wiggle room here. I foresee the economy coming back pretty strongly, pretty shortly after we get out of these stay-at-home orders, as long as Trump can keep us out of these stay-at-home orders. And that's going to be the question, because I did see an article where they were talking about we could potentially have rolling stay-at-home orders throughout the next 18 months. And I don't know if that's actually going to be a thing or not, but that's something that's being discussed. If we can get people back to work and working and get people earning money again and that sort of thing, I honestly believe we're going to get out of this pretty quickly, because all of a sudden now people have jobs again. They're buying food, they're buying products, they're hopefully able to travel again, they're able to do things again. I don't foresee this being a long-term recession like a lot of people are claiming.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope you're right. I'm afraid you might be wrong. I'll go through a few of the highlights here. The Washington-based IMF expects the global economy to contract by 3% in 2020. So I ran the numbers on that. If there's 7.7 billion people in the world, and half of those people work, you're looking at 3.35 billion people. Well, then if that's the workforce of the world, if you take that and you times it by 3% to find out what 3% of that is, if they're expecting 3% of the economy to contract, and you extrapolate that out as unemployment worldwide, that could be upwards of 115 million people. Now, the thing is, we already have 17 million in America. We already have 2 million in the UK, and that's going to be as of next week, according to data that I saw earlier today. Well, if you have another 6.6 million added to the numbers in the US, then you're almost at a quarter of those numbers in just a month between two countries. So I think that 115 million out of work at some point during this year is not out of the realm of possibility. Now, the IMF does say they expect a partial recovery in 2021, but that it's conditional on an improvement in the health crisis. I hope that we bounce back quickly, but I have no faith in my government to be able to make any smart decisions at this point. Never underestimate total depravity. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And you're going to see there's going to be a lot of pissing and moaning matches between Republicans and Democrats. You're elected officials, Jeff. The House isn't in session for the last month. And that's Nancy Pelosi out in your state of California. And then Steny Hoyer says, well, unless it's an emergency, we're not going to be back until May 4th. What the hell? You're the elected officials. You're supposed to be coming up with policy to do something to fix this stuff. But no, you're holed up in your homes because you make $200,000 a year and you get your skids greased by lobbyists on K Street, where they give you $1,000 steak dinners in Washington, D.C., and you sleep with their lobbyist whores that they buy for you if you're married, so that way you can go and you can vote however they want, and you look the other way, and 4 hours later after you come back into session, after you fly in on a private jet, which obviously you don't care about climate change when you do that, but you fly in on a private jet, and 4 hours later after you tank the Senate stimulus bill, you have a 1,250-page document ready to go and say, this is what we want to vote on. Well, obviously you didn't write that. You had that written by lobbyists that was ready for you at the drop of a hat, and you had it tucked away in a corner for a good crisis. Well, now we need to vote on this. I have no faith in my government right now whatsoever. And when they're taking away your constitutional liberties and they're saying, oh, well, we'll grow the economy. Yeah, they'll grow the stock market because they've pumped in $6.6 trillion of liquidity automatically. But have you seen a red cent in your bank account? No. They care about Wall Street. They could give a damn about Main Street. And that's just how it is. That's how it was in the 2008 bank bailout. That's how they're treating you now. And they don't realize that 80% of the businesses in America are small businesses of 500 people or less. And the thing is that I think they have a mutiny on their hands coming up in these elections. People are not going to put up with this because when you threaten their way of life, ideology and political party go out the window, and it becomes who's doing the majority of the living and the dying out here. And if you take away my way of living and my means to be able to put food on the table and be able to make a living and provide for my family, I'm going to come for you. And whether at the ballot box or whether I'm marching on D.C. And if our forefathers did it again, or if our forefathers did it once before and we still have a slice of Americana that believes in it, we'll do it again. Well, final story, and then we'll close up with our commentary. This was a story that you were interested in, and I thought it was interesting too. Smithfield Foods, which ironically is Chinese-owned, shocker. Smithfield Foods announced that its Sioux Falls, South Dakota facility will remain closed indefinitely because of a coronavirus outbreak. Now, this is the nation's largest pork producer. They produce 5% of the pork for the entire country. The CEO said it is impossible to keep our grocery stores stocked if our plants are not running. These facility closures will also have severe, perhaps disastrous repercussions for many in the supply chain. These farmers now have nowhere to send their animals. On top of that, I also found out from my own backyard, where I grew up in, WHOTV 13, the NBC affiliate in Des Moines, has announced that a beef processing plant in one of Iowa's coronavirus hotspot has suspended production as well after several workers contracted COVID-19. It's a beef processing plant in Tama, Iowa. So now we're seeing outbreaks in food processing facilities that now we're being warned could affect our grocery supply chains. That is troubling in and of itself, Jeff. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think like you were saying, it's a Chinese-owned farm. It's definitely a concern when we're doing so much business with communist China. Again, there's a common theme here. Of course, I mean, more than likely an outbreak is coming from somebody traveling back and forth, carrying the disease, coming over, and then there's an outbreak, and then it affects a large group of people because it's a large business. It's something that we need to really consider. Let's take things back to the way America originally was: small business, mom and pop shops, individually owned farms, not mass produced everything. And then I think that it'll be better for our economy. It's going to be better for our safety as well.
Well, to finish up, Jeff, my commentary is now on is going to be the way things should be. And in my the way things should be commentary for today, Sam Jones, our friend, tweeted yesterday a great quote from pastor and theologian, the late, great A.W. Tozer, who said, in every denomination, missionary society, local church, or individual Christian, this law operates. God works as long as his people live daringly. He ceases when they no longer need his aid. Ronald Reagan said, "Evil is powerless when the good are unafraid." The father of conservative thought, Sir Edmund Burke, said, "The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing." The reason why evil seems very powerful now is because the good are running scared. You have a voice. You have rights. It is time to make your voice heard. Because what is happening in the backyards of 90% of states now that have some sort of stay-at-home quarantine order is a trampling of your constitutional rights. We didn't shut down America during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. In fact, we played college football. We saw a World Series where Babe Ruth helped win a World Series for the Boston Red Sox as a pitcher before he then was traded to the New York Yankees. We were coming out of a world war, and we were continuing the Industrial Revolution and building the greatest nation on God's green earth. We took the risk. And if leftists who are now clinging to, well, you want to sacrifice your grandmother on the altar of freedom just to save your 401k, now are claiming the right to life, I say, well, you say my body, my choice, right? So if I choose to live and work and play, then that's my choice. That's my right as an American. You have no right to tell me what to do, because obviously you're telling me I have no right to tell you what to do. So either be consistent with your worldview or sit down and shut up. I would also add A.D. Robles said yesterday on his Twitter account something that I thought was very, very telling. He said, we now have an important data point this weekend that we didn't have before. There are some of those who bear the name of brother in the faith that will call you in. They will turn you in to the authorities. They will support your arrest, etc., for holding or attending worship services on the Lord's Day when Caesar tells you not to. He goes on to say, I make no pronouncements on their status before God, but it's good information to have for the future. This is more than a theological disagreement on Romans 13, which for those of you who don't know, that's Paul saying submit to the governing authorities that are over you. But ironically enough, those people that pimp that, like Dr. Russell Moore, fail to cite that Peter and John didn't obey that order the day after they got out of jail. And Paul didn't obey that when he was asked to bow the knee and worship Nero. He lost his head because of that. A.D. Robles goes on and says, this is a theological disagreement that they're happy and willing to use force of the state to enforce. It's an extremely important data point for pastors and Christians to file. You have wolves among the sheep, and they will try to befriend the governing authorities so that they have a seat at the table of power, so that they're yes men. Hold them accountable. Call them out. You're going to have other constitutionalists and conservatives that will do the same thing. Call them out too. Do not let them intrude on your freedom of religion, your freedom to assemble, your freedom of worship, freedom of religion, freedom of assemble, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Because I guarantee you, all these press people that are saying we don't need to let America go back to work, if their way of life to write what they wanted to was being dictated by the government, they'd be throwing the same fit we are on this podcast. Hold them accountable. You have a voice. Make your voice heard.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off of that as well is, a lot. It's oftentimes reinforced to people that that your voice doesn't matter. You're only one of 350 million people. You can't really do anything. You can't really have a say. You can't change anything. But I would say that history proves that wrong. You look at biblical examples. You look at the entire face of this planet was changed when Christianity was founded with the 12 disciples, 12 guys. Planted the church, started the church, and then Christianity expanded into one of the largest, if not the largest religion in the entire world, in world history. And then you look at the Reformation. Took a handful of guys who took a stand against the Catholic Church: Martin Luther, John Calvin. Like the list goes on and on with that. Took a handful of guys, started the Reformation, started the Protestant Church, and forever corrected that theology. You look at the Revolutionary War. Took a handful of guys to write the Declaration of Independence. It took a handful of guys to rebel against the King of England and start America, which ended up being the freest, most prosperous nation in world history. It doesn't take this mass, humongous movement of 70, 80% of people. It takes a voice. It takes people taking a stand, having a voice, and then putting forth better ideas than the other side. It means conquering their arguments. It means defeating their positions. And that's what we need today more than ever. We need a handful of people. Don't feel like you are outnumbered. Don't feel like your voice doesn't matter. Your voice does matter. However it is that you want to put that forth, whether you want to blog, whether you want a podcast, whether it's just you voting, whatever that might be, God has always used a small number of people for his purposes. So then the question is, why not me? Why not you? That's just what I want to leave you with, something to consider, something to think about, something to reflect on. Why not you? So, but yeah, like that, John, that was a pretty big news roundup. I think we're caught up from everything on the weekend by now, right?
We are.
So yeah, we will be back here tomorrow with whatever news is popping up today. There's always new stuff going on. Let me just recommend as well, if you guys did not catch the press conference yesterday at the White House, do so. It was pure entertainment for especially the first half hour. So definitely check that out as well. And then just a reminder for everybody who is following us here at the GK. Check out our membership program. It's called Plugged In. I've been uploading the individual talks from the Destroy Social Justice Conference for Plugged In members. And then if you sign up for our annual membership, I will get you a copy of the book Social Injustice absolutely free. So for more information on that, you can go to gatekeepersonline.com/plugged-in. And again, it's just one way that you can support us, and we're just going to try to get you as many perks and benefits as we can with that membership program. So check that out, gatekeepersonline.com/plugged-in, and then we will be back here tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time. In about an hour, I'm going to be coming on live with Dr. Mike Spalding with our new show called Ask Dr. Mike that we're going to be streaming live right here, and it's going to be a lot of fun where I'm going to be asking him your questions. So if you do have any questions, you can submit them to gatekeepersonline@gmail.com, and we're beginning to compile next month's episodes worth of questions. So go ahead and submit any theological question, political question, historical question you might have. I'll ask him live on air. And we will see you guys then.